cricket. microphone. It appears that we are approximately 6:30, and we do have a quorum, so I'd like to get things started. I'd like to call to order the fourth regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52. And as Carlos isn't here, if Richard could lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So our first order of business would be to act on the minutes of September 16. Any errors or omissions on that one? Seeing none, we'll accept by general consent. That brings us to communications. Kim.
Thank you. Lane Curtis, he's been a district-wide bus driver. He resigned effective September 29, 2021, and we will certainly miss Lane and wish him the best.
Thank you. Do we have adjustments to the agenda?
The only adjustments are the ones that are there in red, which is to move agenda items 9.16 through 9.19 before agenda item 9.8, and that is so that we can do all the other agenda items before we begin the executive sessions.
Any issues with moving and taking those items up? If not, we will do that. That brings us to committee reports. Finance, Yuri.
We have not met, no rest.
Not met. PTV, Jessica.
Okay, so we went over several things today. The first one was the update on the Lead Central School improvement. So the work has been completed on our rooftop ventilation unit. It's been installed, operation was reviewed with our maintenance team, and at this point we are just waiting for some additional paperwork to be cleared for that to be fully completed. We went over the TPS water issue. So TPS has had issues maintaining water pressure, and we had asked for some bids to see how much it would cost the district to construct a new well versus putting in some water holding tanks. 3 bids were requested, only 1 came back. That was from Goodwin's. It's about $5,000 difference to put in a brand new well versus putting in another holding tank, which we've done several times now. See TMS air quality issue. So they have now put in, they've updated and revised the current system. They added an addition of an exhaust fan, which significantly decreased the CO2 levels. Proposition is to add another exhaust fan at the opposite end of the room to just complete that project. Pine Grove update at the high school. The well has now been connected to the rest of the system. The irrigation system is still to be attached, but that should be happening shortly. The 11 maple trees have been planted. The area has been seeded and grassed. Wastewater treatment plant, the update on that is that the drone survey was completed, where we initially thought we might be putting that system. Looks like that may not be an option any longer. So now we are looking over at the old softball field at central office. So more to come on that. And then the last piece was we had a request from an abutting landowner to remove about 3 to 4 pine trees that were on our property that may potentially pose a risk to fall onto his property. So we are doing a little bit more research on that. And then I think we had discussed that we might be putting forth to vote on am I correct on that? On the TPS well?
Yeah, yes, sorry. The well and the issue at TPS, the water issue at TPS had previously been discussed by finance, and our understanding was that finance had been inclined to pursue drilling a well as as a more permanent solution to the issue. So given that, and given the reporting back that Dean came with this evening with actual figures, that seemed in order.
So, and given that this is an imminent issue that has happened several times recently where TPS has had water issues, the team felt like we didn't want to wait on this any longer. So I'd like to propose that we go forward with the bid for a new well to be put forth on the Turner Primary School by Goodwin Well Drilling.
Do we have a second for them?
Yes.
Second from Richard. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you, Jessica. And I must apologize, I did not introduce our new board member, Brooke. Greetings. Brooke is here from the town of Greene, and we appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you. And again, my apologies for not, this is what happens when I have limited peripheral vision here, but thanks for joining us. Curriculum policy, Joanne.
I probably need the microphone. We met. I guess it's just ready to go. We met and we have 3 policies for you tonight. Board member ethics was a fairly long one because we had to combine, compare, merge 2 different policies. Very similar, but needed to go with the best from each. Then you've got BEC executive session tonight, and that's one that's not necessary, but we're keeping it. And then you've got EJAD, which is copyright compliance, again, not necessary, but we're keeping it. And then we talked about probably 4 or 5 others that we need more information before we bring them back.
Thank you. Student representatives report. We are looking forward to potentially having a student with us at our next meeting. Brings us to administrator report. Teresa.
Good evening. This evening I'm going to speak to you about the work to implement technology in an integrated model across our pre-K to 12 schools. Over the past few years, the Director of Technology, teachers of technology and computer science, and I have met, and at some times we've been joined by elementary principals to explore options for computer science instruction. Even prior to the pandemic, we were looking forward and looking at ways to support the technological needs of our students and staff. Thanks to COVID and the federal relief funds that our district received, we now have one-to-one devices for all of our students. These devices were critical in the event that we were in a remote model of learning or a hybrid model. And now with 5 days of in-person learning, a group of us will be working to create an integration of technology that is innovative and supportive of student learning and instruction. I'm in the process of assembling a team of district personnel, including our instructional coaches, librarians, school counselors, administrators, and teachers, who will join our technology director, technology and computer science teachers, and myself as we plan for a pre-K to 12 integrated model for MSAD 52. The SCRIPT, which stands for, we need to have an acronym, Strategic Computer Science for All Resource and Implementation Planning Tool, is a framework to guide teams of district administrators, school leaders, and educators through a series of collaborative visioning, self-assessment, and goal-setting exercises to create or expand upon a computer science education implementation plan for students. We are going to be using this model. School districts and other local education organizations are the unit of change toward creating rigorous, inclusive, and sustainable K-12, pre-K to 12 computer science education. And this SCRIPT model supports systems level change by addressing 5 key areas: leadership, teacher capacity and development, curriculum and material selection and refinement, partners, and community. On December 2nd and 3rd, this MSAD 52 will work with trained facilitators to make this vision a reality. I will add that these trained facilitators are at no cost. They are free for us. I look forward to sharing our work with you at future meetings, and right now I will do my best to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Questions for Teresa? We'll certainly look forward to hearing more about the group's work and how those devices are helping us out as we go. Thank you. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Kim.
Thank you. Students have been in school for over a month now, and it is an absolute joy to have them back. The majority of our students are adjusting well to the routines of school, and they are enjoying the increased in-person instruction and also time with peers. Homecoming 2 weekends ago went very well, and students are really immersed in learning in all of our schools at this time. Each night we have a board meeting. I report data to keep us apprised of the context of the pandemic. We have 680 new cases reported today. The 7-day average of new cases is down slightly from a week ago, 557 from 557 now. It was 592 a week ago, so a little bit of a decrease there. The state is measuring levels of community transmission of COVID-19. Androscoggin County continues to be in high community transmission. Between 50 and 54% of our eligible students ages 12 to 18 are vaccinated, and that number has remained consistent from 2 weeks ago at our last, or 3 weeks ago at our last board meeting. Vaccination rates for all eligible people of all ages who have had at least their first vaccination in green, 76%. That is up from 75% a few weeks ago. Turner, 76%, also up from 75% a few weeks ago. And Leeds at 67%, also up from 66%. The Department of Health and Human Services is reporting monthly on staff vaccination rates in each school. We will have the numbers for October. We should have them in another week or so, so I'll have those in the October 28th board meeting. As far as in our schools, in Green Central School, we have 43 students in quarantine and 1 staff member in quarantine. In Leeds Central School, we have 26 people in quarantine and 1 student who is positive. At Turner Primary School, we have 3 students in quarantine and 2 students who are positive. At TES, we do not have anyone in quarantine or positive at this time. In Tripp Middle School, we have 56 students in quarantine and 4 students who are positive. And at the high school, we have 28 students in quarantine with 1 student who is positive and 2 staff members who are positive. Last week, the Maine Centers for Disease Control designated Green Central School as having an outbreak of COVID-19, which means that there are 3 or more confirmed cases of COVID-19 within a 14-day period. The Maine CDC also determined that the positive cases at Green Central School were from exposure outside of school, meaning there was no school transmission, which is good. Schools continue to implement the layered mitigation measures recommended by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, including the universal masking, the frequent hand washing and sanitizing, distancing whenever feasible, and ongoing cleaning of buildings and transportation vehicles. One of the really important mitigation measures is for everyone to complete the pre-screening tool for school attendance and to please stay home and or keep your student home if you or they are experiencing symptoms, and call your medical provider right away. There were some questions about O2 Prime at our previous board meeting, and Dean, you were going to share a little information on that with us.
Yes, thank you very much. I did contact Siemens, who's our HVAC provider, and asked a question about some independent studies that they had done. And they did have testing done at an independent lab, and the lab uses Underwriters Laboratory methodology, and so it's a proven method. And we contracted with Siemens. I know this question came up. because there were folks who had the expertise and could get the work done within the allotted time. And they're also the folks that can integrate with our control system. And I think I said this before, the O2 prime uses an ionization process, and that uses it produces hydroxyls, which in these test results were proven effective. The results came in anywhere from 86 to 99% effective. And there were four different tests done on various pathogens. And I don't have any great charts here, but there are some charts and graphs as well. So I'd be glad to provide that as requested. Thank you.
Dean, I would add to that that federal emergency relief funding was used for to purchase the O2 prime. And what that means is that we had to propose that project to the state, and the state did approve us to use that federal emergency funding for that project. We did work with a vendor who is known as an expert in the area of air quality, and we followed those guidelines, and we're able to install the O2 prime in all the schools.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that too as well. There were a number of other school systems in this state, as well as I believe New Hampshire, that were using the same method. Thank you.
Okay, and Betsy, I'd like to continue just a little longer. The pool testing. So I put in the most recent MSAD 52 update, which goes out every other week, some more information about pool testing. Parent permission slips will be out. I hope to have them out by tomorrow. I think it's going to be Tuesday now. But why pool testing matters is because students who are participating in pool testing do not have to quarantine after a school exposure as long as they are asymptomatic. And this supports the goal of keeping students in school as much as possible this year. And then I've had some questions about how the pool testing actually works. Students are assigned to a group or pool. That group could be, a pool could be a classroom at the elementary level. It might be by crew, which is advisory at the middle school. It could be by Hornet Prime Time, which is advisory at the high school. And each pool is tested one time each week. The students swab the lower part of their nostrils, and I know that was a question because anybody who had the original tests where the Q-tip was very high up in the nostrils, that's not what this is. This is the lower part of your nostrils. And they place their swab in a big tube with the swabs of all the other students who are in that particular pool. That tube of swabs is PCR tested together, and schools get the results within 1 or 2 days. If the test comes back negative, nothing further happens until the next week's regularly scheduled pool testing. If the test comes back positive, all the students in that pool are then tested again by a nurse with a rapid antigen test, which gives results in about 15 minutes. In this way, anyone who is positive for COVID-19 is quickly identified and separated, which will help prevent the spread of the virus. Parent permission is required for student participation. I want to say that again, parent participation is, permission is required for student participation. And then the last thing I have is that through a priority notice dated September 17th, the Maine Department of Education announced that the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, we generally know that as OSHA, has confirmed with the Maine Department of Labor that the forthcoming emergency temporary standard will apply to public schools. This emergency temporary standard will require public schools to ensure that their workforce is fully vaccinated for COVID-19 or require any workers who remain unvaccinated to produce a negative COVID-19 test result on at least a weekly basis before coming to work. At this point, we don't have any definitive dates when that will come out or be in effect, but I will keep everyone posted as that information comes out.
Thank you. So that brings us to public comment. We'll do the same thing that I did last time and read through the public participation policy. There are paper copies that were available as folks entered the auditorium, but I'll just refresh your minds and mine. Board meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the official business of the school system. Meetings of the board are open to the public. Although board meetings are not public forums, the board will provide appropriate opportunities for citizens and employees to express opinions and concerns related to the matters under consideration by the board within the guidelines set forth in Board Policy BEDH, public participation at board meetings. Please be aware of the following ground rules from our policy. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair, that would be me, will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic as well as the time each individual may speak, and we went with 5 minutes for any one speaker at our last meeting. In the event of a sizable audience, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so that they may be called on in a fair and efficient manner. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members or the superintendent only with the approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. A student's name is not permitted to be discussed other than by his or her own parent or guardian. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board asks speakers to avoid duplication or repetition of comments. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. No complaints or allegations will be allowed in public concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. These matters will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. Thanks in advance for your cooperation, and as we have done at previous meetings, if folks wish to speak, we have the podium set up over there. We have people that would be interested in speaking.
Hi, good evening. I'm Danielle Snow, and I'm a resident of Turner, living on Pleasant Pond. And if this is, and I apologize, this is my first board meeting, and so I have my host son with me, and would like to have considered an exception to the school policy that limits attendance to 3 exchange students. I wasn't sure if that would be covered in new business or if that is something that we need to bring forth now.
Yep, actually, Danielle, that's on our agenda at 9.18.
Wonderful.
And that's discussion of policy JFA BB.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Jimmy Childs from Leeds. I'm going to discuss the, I know you guys are going to rediscuss the mask policy very soon. I thank you for that. And I was just curious if, because I've been doing a lot of research, probably stuff that's going to be useless to me in the future, but I think there's a lot of things that we need to stand up for in this day and age, and our freedoms, our liberties, stuff like that, I think is very important. So I know that I found some research in 2018, the flu and pneumonia mortality trends in Androscoggin County was 31 deaths per 100,000, and as of yesterday, October 4th, it was 44 per 100,000. So, I mean, it's pretty similar, you know, the similarities on that. Just take that into consideration, please. And I mean, I had a bunch of stuff written down. I'm probably not even going to go through it. You know, this is very stressful on all of us. You know, like I said before, being masked up short periods of time, sure, we can all do that, especially when we're under emergency orders. We're not under emergency orders anymore. So the fact that anybody can have people masked up for long periods of time without, you know, thinking about the other side is crazy. So to me, I'm going to deal with facts here. Maybe not right now, but there's a lot of stuff in here that deals with facts. I looked at both sides of the coin. Everything on the other side was just saying, oh, you got to do it to to save the country, to save the people, you got to mask up. And there's a lot of information that discredits parts where the CDC says the oxygen deprivation isn't true, isn't a real thing. I got scientific notes, there's doctors, there's studies in here that say that it is a real thing. I would love to be able to show you guys that, and I guess I would ask the chair lady that maybe could afford me some time to meet individual with maybe a policy board or anybody individual where I could just present this so you can be more informed on the next time you discuss this. To me, I mean, I looked up policies, and best policy making is to inform both sides of the situation. You know, it's hard when you just say the CDC and these elite people have to say this, so we got to do it. You know, I'll give you a little bit of facts about those elite people. The FDA receives 45% of its annual budget from the pharmaceutical industry and private sources. The WHO receives 50% of budget from the private sources, including Big Pharma. The CDC basically is a vaccine company and owns 56 patents on vaccines and buys and distributes 4.6 billion vaccines annually through its Vaccines for Children program, which represents 40% of its total budget. Now I looked, and nobody that works here on the school board can have conflict of interest in, vendors and stuff like that. So that to me seems like a pretty big conflict of interest when they're telling everybody they got to get vaccinated, they can't take their masks off. That's really big. The American Academy of Pediatrics, 25% from Big Pharma. And we all know about Big Pharma and the opioid crisis, who just paid out billions of dollars to these poor kids. Pfizer and all these people that want to stick the jab to us, which, hey, you want to get jabbed, you want to take that, that's fine. Antibodies are proven way stronger. The fact that these companies ain't even mentioned, hey, if you got antibodies, maybe you don't need to take the vaccine. Why wouldn't they mention that? It's all in messaging. There's a lot of problems with messaging in our government. And there's collected people could get together, just regular idiots like myself, and really could make changes in the world. Like even the killing of the babies. They say, what if somebody got raped or incest or something? We got to let them kill their baby. Well, wouldn't a good messaging be, hey,
Let's stick to items under consideration.
Gotcha.
Board, please.
All right, I'll just finish up where I would like to ask the chair, please, if is there any way that I could meet with a policy board or you personally or anybody to go over some of this before the other meetings, so it could just ease my mind and other parents on showing you, the different aspects of it. I mean, you could go on and look at adverse mask reactions in any Google search and find different things, and crosstabs will take you to crazy rabbit holes where the CDC don't want you to go. But that's all I want is to maybe meet up with a few guys on, anywhere outside football field or something. We could just, have a regular conversation, a debate, anything, just to ease our minds.
Thank you.
I didn't get to sign anything. Did you get a pen? Oh, I found some.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Christina Patrick, and I'm a resident of Leeds. I just have a few questions regarding the ESSER grants that the district received. Was there any condition for those grants to basically have the masking mandates and abide by CDC protocols?
Superintendent Brandt, I think, had spoken at some point about what some of the parameters around those were. I'm sure she can refresh us.
So last year, the state mandated the health and safety measures that included the masking, the distancing, hand washing, sanitizing, all of those things. And that's why we were in the hybrid model, was because we didn't have enough space to have everyone back in and do that mandate. So last year, some of the grants that we got through the emergency federal funding, we had to attest that we were doing what the state mandated us to do, but the state had already mandated us to do it. We had no choice, we had to do it. But there's been no connection whatsoever with that federal money saying you have to mask like right now, because there is no mandate from the state. So there's no mandate from like ESER 3 around that at all.
So there's no mandate, which is not a law, on masking, but we're still doing it?
So what happened was I went ahead and recommended to the board that we follow the CDC recommendations because we've got all the kids back in now, and the kids are closer, and we know that's when the virus can be transmitted, and then the board took a vote to support that recommendation.
Okay. So none of the money that we received was tied to putting those masking mandates in place?
That's correct.
All right, I've heard from other school boards that that was the case. And I basically was upset about the fact that if that wasn't disclosed to us, because you guys know, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing it from us parents that don't want our kids in masks. You know, we've stood here week after week, or, you know, meeting after meeting, begging you to take the masks off of our children because they're healthy and you're hurting their immune systems. And to me, taking money from the government in exchange for masking our children is a bribe. So if that's not the case, then I guess that's... my other question is, the CDC has issued a recall on the PCR test, saying it is ineffective for discriminating between the flu and COVID-19, effective 12/31. Why are we doing the pool testing with a PCR test that is known to have false positives?
So if it's something that's new information, that's certainly something we can look into.
That's back from June.
Yeah,
That was
so-
released by the CDC in June.
Right, so your first question was one that was fairly readily answered because it was information that we'd shared previously. That one's not, certainly not one that I would anticipate folks might be up to speed on right at this instant.
So you don't know, are you going to look into why we're still using the PCR test?
So typically how we've handled questions that have been posed during public comment is that we do follow up on them and certainly at our next meeting try to address any information that we found.
So that's it.
Thank you.
Jeff Markey, Turner, parent of 4 children in the schools district. My questions weren't related to masking, but I did have one series of questions for the chair. I did see a sign on the way in that said that masking was required, and I did hear that it was referenced that it was universal masking within the pool, within the schools, including Levitt here. Are there any exceptions to that rule?
Exceptions for student and staff while school is in session? No. For example, for our proceedings this evening, this is a public meeting that's being held in a school. It's not a school activity per se.
Okay, so the sign outside saying that the face coverings were required was a suggestion or a requirement?
No, for students and staff, they are most assuredly required.
Okay. So my question wasn't about masks, but I just want to state on the record that I find it incredibly insulting as a parent to sit here and witness a board as a collective group voted to require our students in the schools to follow masking, to wear them below their nose and on their chins, or not have them on at all. It's kind of hypocritical as a group to be doing that while requiring our students to follow different rules. But my reason for being here today is more towards another topic that I think needs to be addressed by the board as a whole across the district, and that is the issue of bullying. It goes hand in hand right now with all of the mental health problems that the students are dealing with, masking, unmasking, groups, not groups. But I've dealt with it for far too long, and this past month or two, it came to a pretty big head. Kind of on my last straw. I have notified different administrators that this is kind of like my last straw before I choose a litigation path. But it shouldn't be that my student is repeatedly attacked by a single individual student, over and over again, documented. And my request to have separation denied because we didn't want to, quote, honor those requests, presumably because moving the bully would be offensive to him. I don't really care. It was documented that my son was abused and attacked physically multiple times. 2 years ago this started. Then this year it happened again. After the last year they were moved apart, then obviously COVID happened and they separated anyway. It worked. There was no bullying because they weren't around each other. Well, lo and behold, we get back this year, they're in the same class again. Not only are they in the same class, they're seated next to each other within the class, presumably the teacher not given any indication of what had gone on. I had to reach out several times after my son was once again struck from behind, unprovoked, while trying to walk away from this student. Furious, I reached out to both the teacher, the principal, and the superintendent, which we've gone and had conversations since. But it shouldn't have taken me 2 weeks to get a response. And then when the response was, you can move your son's schedule around, or trust us. You have to forgive me, but I'm sorry, not sorry. The trust was not there after the district repeatedly failed my son by putting him back in the same situation. So I did, I vented. I went online and I vented. Didn't name names, didn't call out people, I just vented. What I then found out and shared with one of the principals as well as Superintendent Brandt is that whether this district realizes it or not, you have a serious bullying problem. And the overwhelming community sense that I received, people reaching out to me unprovoked, I just spoke my mind, is that the district is not equipped and or not prepared to handle these things, whether or not it's because of what the mandates of the state are. That's the perception that is out there, and I've found through comments, not gossip, to myself and people reaching out to me, that many people are going through this same thing. I know of a close friend whose young son was struck several times in the course of just this school year alone. It's not okay. And answers of, we'll move your son, or we'll move your daughter, or we'll talk about our feelings, that's not working. So the board needs to do something to better address this before it's too late. Kids should not become a statistics. Suicides are up nationwide. Kids are dealing with mental health as it is. Bullying needs to be stopped and stomped out, like, right away. So whether you guys realize it or not, there's a big problem with it, or at least a perceived problem amongst parents that the schools don't know, don't care, can't do anything, aren't funded in that regard. Time to myself. But that needs to be addressed.
Thank you for bringing your concerns to us. And just to make sure we're clear, you have, as far as this specific situation, you have had follow-up conversations with, as you indicated, the teacher, the principal, and the superintendent.
We have. It took several rounds of phone calls and meetings. They really didn't say a whole lot that was anything different. They admitted they made a mistake, that my son shouldn't have been put in the same class. I said, okay, fix the mistake. And then they did present some measures, and we agreed that there would be some time to let it play out, but that I was going to, at the end of the day, go with what I needed to do if it didn't work. But my point is, it shouldn't have taken 2 weeks, and I shouldn't have had to reach out multiple times without getting a response from some of the highest taxpayer-paid administrators in this district. That was a slap in the face.
Thank you for clarifying. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak? If not, thank you. We will certainly follow up on questions that were posed and issues that were raised there as well as we move forward with meetings to come. That brings us to old business, which we don't have any of. We'll try the consent agenda. Would entertain a motion for the list. And that was Richard. Do we have a second?
Second.
Yuri? All those in favor? Unanimous? That brings us to new business. Instructional nominations, 9.1. Levitt Area High School physical education / teacher. Kim?
Yes. So Principal Shaw is nominated, and I am nominating Wendy Milliken for the position of physical education and wellness teacher here at Levitt Area High School. Wendy has recently been teaching the same courses at Tripp Middle School. She is excited to make a move and work with high school students, and the high school is very excited to welcome her.
Thank you. Would entertain a motion? Richard, do you have a second? Jessica? All those in favor? Unanimous. Brings us to 9.2, approval of 3 fundraisers for Levitt Area High School's Key Club to raise monies for Ronald McDonald House charities, Trick or Treat for UNICEF, and Pennies for Patients.
Second.
Richard and Yuri, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Brings us to 9.3, approval for an additional special education Ed Tech 1 for Turner Elementary School, funded from local entitlement grant. Do you have a motion for that one?
Yes.
Richard, do we have a second? Jessica?
Aye.
What's Jessica / Yuri? Discussion on this one. Yuri?
There's some additional information of what we need an additional special ed tech on board.
Kim, would you like to address this one? Or?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yep. Yuri's question was for additional information regarding the needs and...
So, depending on needs of any certain student, then we could potentially need, in this case, an ed tech to support that student with needs that he or she has. The money would not come out of the general budget, it would come out of the local entitlement grant, special ed grant.
So these are not additional funds needed from our local budget?
Correct.
Thank you. Other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.4, approval for an additional special education Ed Tech 2 for Turner Elementary School, funded from the contingency position in the fiscal year 22 budget. Richard and Yuri, discussion on this one. Yuri?
Why would the last, how come the one before would be funded out of a local entitlement grant and this one not?
So we budgeted for a contingency position in the general budget in case the need arises, and that need has arisen, and so that is coming out of there. The other situation was not anticipated, and because of that special ed director, Rebecca Drysdale, has looked for money in local entitlement grants, so it's not to impact the general budget.
So just to clarify, Kim, this one was contained in the fiscal year 22 budget as a contingency position. So again, it's not that we're looking for additional monies.
That is correct. We're not looking for additional money.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor? 9.5 is first reading and acceptance of revised policy BCA, MSAD. I'm thinking MSAD 52 should be in there, school board member ethics. Richard, do we have a second?
Second.
Crystal? Discussion on this one. All those in favor? Joanne, were you voting in favor of, or were you
What?
in favor? Thank you. I didn't want to...
I just need to make sure my phone is off. I can hear it when it rings, even though I guess nobody else can. So that amazes me when it goes off.
Thank you. Just don't want to make any assumptions on votes. That brings us to 9.6, first reading and acceptance of revised policy BEC, executive session, and regulations BECR, executive session procedure.
So moved.
Second.
Richard and Yuri, discussion on this one. Jessica?
Was there any changes? Oh, is it just the goal? Oh, sorry.
Any other discussion or questions on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to 9.7, which is first reading and acceptance of revised policy EGAD, copyright compliance, and deletion of regulations EGADR.
Second.
Yuri and Richard, discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. And I believe we were moving to, since our other 9.8, 9.10, 9.12, and 14 are all executive sessions, the board was in agreement that we move to 9.16 to take up while we still have folks here. And 9.16 is approval of a $3,000 donation to Tripp Middle School in memory of Rebecca Weber.
So moved.
Richard, do we have a second?
Second.
Jessica, second. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.17, approval of $150 donation to Tripp Middle School for the Tiger Takeout Pantry.
So moved.
Richard, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Crystal, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to 9.18, discussion of policy JFA-BB, admission of exchange students.
So moved.
Well, we actually have it listed as a discussion, so maybe if either Kim or Mr. Shaw would like to guide us through what we're up to. So, but save that thought.
The purpose of the discussion this evening is around the policy itself. It restricts the number of exchange students that we can accept here, 11 to 3. It caps the number at 3. We've had a request to accept a 4th exchange student. He had been placed at a different school, and his placement has changed into our school district and looking to attend Liberty-Our High School. So the purpose of the discussion is but literally to ask for a one-time exception to allow us to have 4 for the school year 21-22.
So since it's outside the bounds of the policy, we would need a specific board action to have an additional student. So if board members were interested in that, we could have a motion to that effect.
I make a motion that we allow the 4 exchange students to come to this school for this coming year.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Jessica? So discussion at this point. Jessica?
Is there any particular reason that we limit 3? Is it a funding issue?
It's not a funding issue. I believe it was written in the original policy. If I look back on the original policy, it was written in like 98, March of 98. It's been revised a couple times since, but that limit has been in there since its inception, I believe. I'm not sure why. I was happened to be in college at the time, so I'm not sure why they picked 3, but that was the number that they picked.
Okay.
Actually, I take that back. I wasn't in college in 98. I was working in 98. Yeah, sorry about that. Now I'm aging myself.
Richard?
I think they should go back to the curriculum and policy committee to be reviewed specifically in terms of what number. So maybe that, I guess, is motion.
So we have to deal with the motion that's on the floor first, but certainly the manner in which our subcommittees have operated, I'm seeing Teresa shaking her head and Joanne as well, that's certainly something that can be discussed. by the subcommittee as well. Yuri?
Is there any funding issue with additional students, or are they part of the whole count? Does that make sense?
It doesn't make sense. Could you rephrase the question?
Do exchange students apply to the count of students enrolled in this district?
Yes.
I believe they
Jason said-
do.
I'm thinking Jason saying yes.
I don't see Jason, but I believe that they would.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor of this one-time exemption to accept an additional exchange student? Unanimous? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Thank you. 9.19 is to report the completion of the probationary period for the following employee: Amanda Swart, TES Special Ed Tech and Regular Ed Tech 2, and that was October 5th, 2021. That brings us back to, unless there are any other items of business that we did not have, the board members are aware of that we need to take up, that would bring us back to 9.8, which is an executive session to discuss compensation of officials, appointees, employees pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A for the purposes of anyone who might be watching at home. The other executive sessions are to discuss compensation, to discuss duties of officials, appointees, and employees, and to discuss Tri-Town Education Association support staff negotiations. Do we have a motion for 9.8? Richard, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Crystal. All those in favor? Unanimous. So we will proceed into executive session. Thank you, folks, for joining us this evening.